stories unfolding before your eyes tonight. Court-martial gone soft on plotters. Iceland's angry ladies just say no to work. And stock market in chaos, everyone in trouble on Black Thursday. And later in the programme, we find out whether Mr. Wobblebottom from Ealing will get a world record for eating 57 teaspoons of jam in 1 minute. Those are the headlines. Steal my inflection.
The dice deduces ties news bang, carving up the reality buffet with a knife of knowledge. 1964.
Saigon's latest coup attempt has gone down faster than a bowl of pho on a hot day. Generals Duke and Fatt, armed with strongly worded memos and questionable dance moves, tried to seize control of the government. Their plan? A choreographed assault on the presidential palace involving interpretive dance and amplified poetry.
Eyewitnesses report bewildered soldiers asking, "Are we invading or auditioning for a musical?" The coup collapsed when American officials bribed the generals with ice cream and a promise of better choreography next time.
President Khan, brushing off the coup attempt like a pesky mosquito, remarked, "It's Tuesday, isn't it? Must be time for another coup." This marks South Vietnam's 7th failed coup this month alone, putting them well behind their quarterly target for regime change.
1975.
Iceland has ground to a halt as 25,000 women simultaneously decided to do absolutely nothing. The Great Refusal, as it's been dubbed, has left the nation's men struggling to cope with the terrifying realities of childcare and domestic chores.
Children are running wild, dinners are burning, and the country's supply of clean socks is dwindling rapidly. One distraught husband was found sobbing in a supermarket, clutching a can of beans and begging for instructions.
The women, meanwhile, are enjoying a well-deserved day off in Reykjavik's main square, leaving behind a trail of unwashed dishes and a nation on the brink of sartorial collapse. One protester explained, "We've been holding up half the sky for centuries. It's time they learned how to hold up their own trousers."
1929.
The stock market has completely bloody collapsed. Traders were seen hurling themselves from windows after discovering their shares were worth less than a dead man's dandruff. The crash began when someone noticed that money isn't actually real, causing mass hysteria on Wall Street.
Veteran trader Horace Diamond Hands McGillicuddy lost everything except his bowler hat. "I've gone from caviar to cat food in under an hour," he sobbed while trying to pawn his gold teeth.
The Federal Reserve attempted to restore confidence by releasing several thousand chickens into the trading floor, but this only made things worse. One broker was heard screaming, "The sky is falling," before being pecked unconscious by anxious poultry.
Meanwhile, President Hoover has advised Americans to remain calm and consider investing in turnips. The Dow Jones now officially worth less than a packet of stale crackers found behind a radiator in 1926.
News bang, broadcasting the bizarre one day at a time, because truth is always weird.
And now, with a special look at the weather patterns affecting our green and pleasant land, here's Shakanaka Giles with today's forecast.
Southern England, a nip in the air. Cheeks playfully pinched, woolies and hot toddies recommended. Flammable attire not advised. Bonfire night approaching. Midlands, mixed bag. Showers, sunshine, British weather doing its thing. Wellies, sunglasses, brolly, free rinse, optional. North, howler, gales, wig removing strength, batten down the hatches, granny's flower pots, secure them. Windisher Kite Festival, ideal conditions. Summary, south, nippy. Midlands, mixed. North, blowy. Wrap up warm. Kites, encouraged. That's all the weather.
1944.
Breaking news from 1944, where the Japanese super battleship Musashi has met its watery demise in what can only be described as the Pacific's most dramatic bath time incident. The vessel, essentially a floating city of steel with guns the size of double-decker buses, succumbed to what witnesses describe as rather a lot of American planes. The pride of the Japanese fleet, built to rule the waves, has instead chosen to explore the seabed. For more on this maritime catastrophe, we cross live via our time telephone to our war correspondent Brian Bastable, who's hovering somewhere above the Leyte Gulf in 1944.
The sky is ablaze with the fury of 1,000 suns as wave after wave of American aircraft descend upon the mighty Japanese battleship Musashi. The very ocean trembles beneath the onslaught, the once tranquil waters now churning with the blood of the fallen and the oil of the stricken vessel. I stand on the deck of a nearby destroyer, my face seared by the heat of the explosions, my ears deafened by the cacophony of destruction. The Musashi, a behemoth of steel and firepower, shudders under the relentless assault, her armor plating buckling like tin foil under the hammer blows of the bombs and torpedoes. The American pilots, their faces grim with determination, swoop low over the battleship, releasing their payloads with deadly precision. The Musashi's anti-aircraft guns belch fire and smoke, trying in vain to swat the attackers from the sky, but it is like trying to stop a swarm of locusts with a fly swatter. The deck of the Musashi is a scene of unimaginable carnage. Sailors, their bodies torn asunder by shrapnel, lie in twisted heaps, their blood mingling with the seawater that sloshes across the once pristine surface. The ship's massive turrets, their barrels now bent and blackened, loom like the broken teeth of some monstrous beast. As the hours drag on, the Musashi's fate becomes increasingly clear. Her hull riddled with holes, her superstructure ablaze, she begins to list heavily to one side, her crew frantically struggling to keep her afloat. But it is a losing battle, and soon the mighty vessel succumbs to the inevitable, rolling over and slipping beneath the waves, taking with her the lives of over 1,000 brave sailors. The Battle of Leyte Gulf will forever be remembered as a turning point in the war, the moment when the seemingly invincible Japanese Navy was brought to its knees by the sheer courage and tenacity of the American forces. And the Musashi, once a symbol of Japan's naval might, now lies shattered on the ocean floor, a grim reminder of the terrible price of war. This is Brian Bastable reporting from the heart of the inferno, where the very fabric of history is being rewritten in blood and fire.
1975.
Iceland has ground to a spectacular halt as women across the nation have decided to down tools, down children, and down pretty much everything else. The unprecedented action saw 90% of the female population effectively vanish from their usual duties, leaving the country's men to discover that dinner doesn't, in fact, cook itself. Reports suggest that several confused husbands were found wandering the streets of Reykjavik, holding unpaired socks and partially dressed toddlers. For more on this seismic shift in Nordic domestic relations, we cross live to our political correspondent Hardeman Pesto, who's been following developments from his own kitchen, where I believe he's currently attempting to operate a washing machine.
Martin, I'm here in Reykjavik, where the streets are absolutely deserted. Not a woman to be seen anywhere. I'm with Professor Bjorn Bjornsson, head of the Institute of Gender Economics. Professor, surely this is an overreaction.
Actually, it's Professor Helga Bjornsdotter, and no, it isn't.
Right, sorry. But surely leaving all the men to cope alone is a bit extreme.
I should be at work right now. Instead, I'm here talking to you.
Pesto, are you aware that Professor Bjornsdotter organized this strike?
Well, that explains the... Martin, I can report that Iceland's economy has ground to a complete halt. Men everywhere are struggling with basic tasks like, well, everything really.
And what are you personally struggling with, Pesto?
Nothing. I'm perfectly capable of... Hold on, something's burning.
That would be your microphone cable melting on the hot plate you left on.
No, I meant to do that. It adds atmosphere to the report. The smell of burning rubber really captures the chaos.
Pesto, why is there smoke coming from your trousers?
I tried to iron them while wearing them.
This is exactly why we're striking. Men like you who can't even...
Martin, I'm getting reports that fish processing plants are at a standstill, banks are in chaos, and schools are... Actually, I need to go. My shirt sleeve is on fire.
Professor Bjornsdottir, would you say this demonstration has proved its point?
Well, looking at your correspondent...
Yes, I think we've all learned something today, though in Pesto's case, mainly about fire safety.
News bang, piercing the haze of perception with a sword of truth. AD Days, 2004.
And now, for a look back at that extraordinary day in 2004 when football and fine dining collided in spectacular fashion at Old Trafford. Here's our sports correspondent, Ryder Boff.
Right then, sports fans, Ryder Boff here, with a tale from the footy pitch that's more explosive than a dodgy kebab after a night on the town. It's 2004 Old Trafford, Manchester United versus Arsenal, and the atmosphere's thicker than a bowl of Bernard Manning's gravy. Rooney goes down in the box. The ref points to the spot. Penalty to Manchester United. Controversial, you say? Well, I've seen more convincing dives in a synchronised swimming competition. But a penalty it is. And up steps Ruud van Nistelrooy, cool as a cucumber, to take it. He slots it home. Goal. Manchester United 1, Arsenal 0. And on the sidelines, Arsene Wenger's having a right old paddy. He's hopping about like a flea on a hot griddle. He's got a face on him like a bulldog chewing a wasp. But the real drama, folks, kicked off after the final whistle. As the players headed down the tunnel, all hell broke loose. It was a food fight of epic proportions, a culinary carnage that would make Gordon Ramsay weep into his risotto. Flying pizza, scattered sandwiches, a rogue sausage roll whizzing past my ear. It's a buffet brawl, folks, a culinary free-for-all. Hold on, is that a prawn vol au vent heading my way? Duck, I repeat, duck. That pastry could take an eye out. I haven't seen this much food flying through the air since Lorraine Kelly's disastrous attempt at a barbecue in a gale. In fact, this is worse. It's like a scene from Apocalypse Now, only with more quiche. Young Cesc Fabregas, that fiery Spanish midfielder, allegedly lobbed a slice of pizza at Sir Alex Ferguson's head, a Hawaiian pizza no less. Talk about adding insult to injury. The gaffer's face was a picture, a mix of tomato sauce, mozzarella, and pure fury. The Battle of the Buffet, they're calling it, and it's certainly put a dent in Arsenal's unbeaten run. Manchester United, meanwhile, are celebrating like they've just won the lottery, while Sir Alex is probably trying to get that pizza stain out of his lucky tie. This is Ryder Boff, signing off. And remember, in the world of football, sometimes the only thing more satisfying than a victory is a good old-fashioned food fight.
Polly Beep is hovering somewhere above the home counties in what she assures me is a fully licensed autogyro.
Good evening, road warriors. Breaking news from Berkshire, where the Loddon Bridge false work has just done a spectacular impression of a collapsing souffle. If you're heading that way on the A3290, expect delays as construction workers attempt to untangle themselves from what looks like the world's largest game of pickup sticks. 3 casualties reported and 10 injuries, making this possibly the worst structural party game ever attempted. Meanwhile, in New York, 200,000 people are currently clogging up both ends of the spanking new George Washington Bridge. They're all desperate to be the first to cross what's currently the world's longest suspension bridge. If you're planning on joining the celebrations, pack sandwiches and perhaps a small tent. This could take a while. And in other news, the M25's orbital car park is experiencing its usual Thursday evening meditation session. Traffic's moving at the speed of continental drift between junctions 9 and 12. Quick update from the A404M. A herd of mechanical sheep has escaped from a local robotics facility. They're currently grazing on the central reservation and occasionally short-circuiting the traffic lights. This is Polly Beep, reminding you that whether you're dodging falling scaffolding or queuing to cross revolutionary suspension bridges, always remember to pack a spare pair of socks. Back to you in the studio.
1851.
Our science correspondent Calamity Prendeville looks back at a remarkable British astronomical discovery that changed how we view the cosmos.
Good evening, viewers. On this day in 1851, British astronomer William Lassell made an extraordinary discovery using nothing more than a modified telescope and his grandmother's tea cosy. While testing his new British-made Moon-O-Matic 3000 in his back garden in Liverpool, he spotted two new moons orbiting Uranus, Umbriel and Ariel.
The Moon-O-Matic, powered by a revolutionary steam engine and equipped with special Yorkshire tea-stained lenses, was actually designed to spot sheep that had wandered too far from their fields. However, its powerful magnification accidentally revealed these celestial bodies, making Britain the leader in accidental space discovery.
Lassell named the moons after characters from Shakespeare, continuing the British tradition of naming space objects after literary figures. He initially wanted to call them Spot and Tiddles after his cats, but the Royal Astronomical Society insisted otherwise.
The discovery was celebrated with a special edition of digestive biscuits and a commemorative tea towel. Lassell's grandmother's tea cosy was later donated to the Science Museum, where it continues to inspire astronomers to this day.
This breakthrough proved that you don't need fancy foreign equipment to make astronomical discoveries. Just a good cup of tea, a biscuit, and a proper British sense of determination. This is Calamity Prendeville, reporting for Newsbang.
Denise to film, Sister Newsbang, is the daily sacrament of reality.
And now here's Sandy O'Shaughnessy with tonight's Royal Roundup, reporting from his usual perch atop Dublin Castle with what he assures me is a particularly regal moon.
Nice and easy.
And a very good evening to you. Yes, good evening and thrice good evening. Sandy O'Shaughnessy here, picking up the royal baton from our esteemed colleague Martin Bang. And what an evening it is. The 24th of October, 2024, and the moon's hanging over Dublin like a great big celestial digestive biscuit. Now then, speaking of digestives, I've got a fascinating tale that'll go perfectly with your evening cuppa. Picture, if you will, dear listeners, the year 1260. While my great-great-great-grandfather was presumably perfecting his recipe for potato scones, though potatoes hadn't reached Ireland yet, but let's not let facts get in the way of family mythology, over in Egypt there was a spot of bother brewing. Sultan Qutuz, and that's spelled exactly how it sounds, unless you're saying it wrong, had just pulled off the medieval equivalent of winning the All-Ireland final. He'd given the mighty Mongols a proper thrashing at the Battle of Angelut. But you know what they say about success. It has many fathers, but defeat is an orphan with a grudge and a sharp blade. Poor old Qutuz was riding high one minute, then, well, let's just say his General Baybars decided to do a bit of impromptu job promotion. Reminds me of that time on Dallas when... But I digress. Speaking of which, I've just received a lovely letter from Mrs. O'Malley in Kilkenny. She writes, "Dear Sandy, my cat has started speaking in medieval Arabic. Should I be concerned?" Well, Mrs. O'Malley, perhaps your feline friend has been brushing up on their Mamluk history. You know, it's funny how these things work out. One minute you're the Sultan of Egypt, the next minute, well, you're not. Rather like my Aunt Peggy's second marriage. Brief, but memorable. Though in her case, there was less assassination and more throwing of crockery. But before we drift too far into the annals of O'Shaughnessy family history, let me remind you that you're listening to Sandy O'Shaughnessy's Royal Roundup, where we make history as cozy as a pot of tea and twice as warm. And on that note, I'll hand you back to the dulcet tones of our evening playlist. This is Sandy O'Shaughnessy saying, remember, every sultan has his day, but not every day has its sultan. Good evening, and once more for luck, good evening.
All over the country, for everyone.
And on this day in 1929, Wall Street experienced what can only be described as the financial equivalent of dropping one's ice cream cone face down on the pavement. The Great Depression began when stocks plummeted faster than a lead balloon in a vacuum. Witnesses report seeing bankers literally trying to catch falling shares with butterfly nets. The Dow Jones Industrial Average took such a tumble it didn't get up again until 1954, presumably due to severe bruising. For more on this historical monetary mayhem, we cross live via our time telephone to our business correspondent Perkins Stornoway, who's standing outside the New York Stock Exchange in 1929.
Dogger south, veering west, becoming cyclonic. In 1929, the stock market crash. Shannon, occasionally rough. The market plunged nearly 13% on October 28, Black Monday. Fastnet, good, occasionally poor. On Tuesday 29, Black Tuesday, it slumped 12% more. Lundy, fair. The Dow Jones Industrial Average had lost almost half its value by mid-November. Biscay, occasional rain. Investors wept as their shares turned to ash in their hands. Portland, fair to good. The Great Depression followed. Humber, backing north 4 or 5. Banks closed, businesses folded like origami doves in a paper blizzard. Portslade Wind Farm collapsed under the strain. By November 1954, the Dow recovered to pre-crash levels. And that's the business.
1885.
And on this day in 1885, the Russian cargo vessel Dmitry spectacularly failed to not hit Whitby. The ship's dramatic grounding would later inspire author Bram Stoker to pen his vampire epic, proving that sometimes the best literary inspiration comes from watching Russians crash into Yorkshire. The incident marked the first time a shipping disaster had directly led to the creation of fictional neck-biting aristocrats. For more on this cultural cornerstone of maritime misfortune, we cross to our culture correspondent Smithsonia, Moss, who's standing in Whitby where local reenactors are currently attempting to recreate the crash using a pedalo and several packets of tomato sauce.
Now at this point of the evening, we welcome listeners on FM who've just joined us.
Whoa, Newsbang Nation. Smithsonia Moss here, your queen of the macabre. And honey, let me tell you, this story is more chilling than a vampire's kiss. We're time traveling back to October 18th, 1885, the day the Russian schooner Dmitry decided to trade the stormy seas for the sandy shores of Whitby, England. Now, shipwrecks are always dramatic, but this one had extra spice, a hint of the supernatural, and enough spooky vibes to inspire a literary masterpiece. Yep, I'm talking about Dracula, baby. Okay, so picture it. A foggy morning in Whitby, the wind howling like a banshee, and suddenly, bam! This Russian ship, loaded with silver sand, crashes onto the beach like a bat out of hell. The locals are all like, "What in the bloody hell is this?" And the crew is like, "Vodka, please." But here's where things get creepy. A few years later, A young writer named Bram Stoker visits Whitby, hears about the Dimitri shipwreck, and his imagination goes into overdrive. He's like, "Hold my garlic, I've got a story brewing." And you know what? That shipwreck became the inspiration for the arrival of Dracula in England. In Stoker's novel, a ship called the Demeter, sound familiar, runs aground in Whitby, carrying a certain Transylvanian count with a taste for blood. Talk about a literary legacy, honey. That spooky shipwreck wasn't just a maritime disaster, it was the birth of a literary icon, a vampire who's been haunting our nightmares for over a century. Now, those poor sailors aboard the Dimitri probably had no idea their misfortune would become the stuff of literary legend. I bet they were more concerned with getting their sea legs back and finding a decent pub in Whitby than inspiring a gothic horror masterpiece. But hey, that's how it goes, right? Sometimes the most mundane events can spark the most extraordinary creations. It's like finding a diamond in a pile of silver sand. So, there you have it, folks. The Dimitri shipwreck, a maritime mishap that gave birth to a literary legend. It's a reminder that inspiration can strike anywhere, even in the most unexpected places, and that sometimes the most frightening stories are rooted in reality. And if you're ever in Whitby, take a stroll along the beach, and who knows, maybe you'll feel a chill in the air, or catch a glimpse of a shadowy figure lurking in the fog. Just don't forget your garlic and a crucifix, just in case. Wahoo!
News bang, fishing for truth in a barrel of lies.
And finally, a look at tomorrow's papers. The Times. Horse tired of Yanks winning all the battles. The Mail lead with, "Is there really a red under your bed?" Exclusive. The Telegraph. Agincourt. Froggy boot ban. The Mirror have, "Rebel leaders price-cutting spree backfires." The Express. "Henry's arrows hit bullseye." And that's it. News Bang will be back tomorrow with more dull facts and awful jokes. But not if I have anything to do with it. Night-night.
Tune in next time for more artificially intelligent hilarity. News Bang is a comedy show, written and recorded by AI. All voices impersonated. Nothing here is real. Good night.